Welcome to 50 Plus in Montgomery County, a monthly program that is a voice for many, produced by the Commission on Aging, of which I'm a community member. This show is insightful for people of all ages, and each episode takes a fresh look at important issues by spotlighting older adults in the community, representatives of services and programs, and activities of interest to older adults. My name is Katie Smith. On this month's show, we're going to highlight Black History Month and talk about Montgomery County parks. So that'll be very exciting. As you know, all month long during Black History Month, Montgomery County Parks will have a series of programs that highlight the stories, struggles, and successes of African Americans. Joining me to have this discussion today is Mark Thorne, who's the historic site manager at the Josiah Henson Museum and Park for Montgomery Parks, and Cheryl Spicer, who's the Cultural Resource Museums Manager for the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission at the Department of Parks for Montgomery County. But let's start with Mark. Mark, you've been on the show before and have given us a lot of good information, but can you just give us a brief background and overview about the Josiah Henson Museum and Park?
Sure, and it's my pleasure to be back with you, Katie. Josiah Henson Park is a museum and park is on about a 4 acre plot here, right off of Old Georgetown Road in Montgomery County. And this museum and park is the site of the actual location where Josiah Henson was enslaved. We developed this property starting with the purchase of the first home in 2006, and we started the process of developing the exhibits that would culminate in the opening of our museum to the public here in 2021.
Mark, when people go to the museum, what will they find?
Well, this museum, given the name Josiah Henson Museum and Park, it tells a little bit about the life of Josiah Henson. Josiah Henson, as many know, was an enslaved man that was born in Southern Maryland in Port, Port Tobacco in Charles County, Maryland, and eventually was enslaved here in this on the property here in Montgomery County. He grew up to be a strong man who eventually was sent to another plantation by his owner, and where he eventually escaped.
Mhm.
Made his way to Canada, was able to come back to the United States to free over 100 people on the Underground Railroad. He eventually wrote a narrative to tell his story, and that story was then informed Harriet Beecher Stowe when she wrote the book Uncle Tom's Cabin. So that's a little bit about the man. And what people will see when they come to our site is a museum that talks about his time here in Maryland.
Mhm.
Guests will start off their experience with a 12-minute orientation film that sets up the experience. Then they'll come and visit the historic house that was constructed around 1800. And we use the art technique called graphic novel technique, and we get to explore his time here in Maryland. And it tells the story of his life and also the story of other enslaved that lived here in Montgomery County, Maryland. And we also talk a little bit about the Uncle Tom moniker and how that's evolved over time.
Well, it sounds like the museum offers a very unique cultural experience. But do you offer programming? And if so, can you talk a little bit about the programming?
Sure, we offer several types of programming. We offer educational program. That's programs for school groups to come and experience the museum, but we add interactive components to that experience. And we align the programs that we offer for education groups, we align them with the standards so that when a teacher brings a group here, they can get an experience that aligns to what they're teaching in the school, and it will supplement what they're doing in the classroom. We also have other types of programs. For instance, we have our family day programs that are typically open when we're open to the general public, and we have hands-on programming, and that's when we invite the entire family, especially those young kids, to come out and get a taste of history, and we make it very hands-on. And then we have what we call our history hour program, which is a series of lectures done in the evenings.
What types of speakers do you bring in, especially for the evening history hour?
So we have a variety of speakers that we bring out for the history hour. We bring out educators, historians, authors, and just people that can provide more information about history and its connection to Montgomery County, whether it's African American history or general history of the community and of this county. We bring them here to share that information.
Mm. Now, Mark, is there a fee to attend any of your programming?
Yes. So general admission to the museum is $5 for adults, $4 for seniors 55 and older, and $4 for children. Our history hour programs, there's a set $5 admission fee, but we do have wonderful programs that we do have days throughout the year where we offer free admission.
Wow, that's exciting. I'm just thinking about your position in the county. What other resource partners do you engage with in Montgomery County?
So aside from our internal partners here at Parks, and I think Cheryl
Mhm.
will mention some of those partners, but we also work with organizations like Heritage Montgomery, the Maryland Historical Society, our partners in Prince George's County, because we are part of a bi-county commission. Other museums such as the Button Farm in Montgomery County. So we work with like-minded organizations, and that's one of the things I hope to bring here is the idea of partnerships. We are stronger together.
Yes, yes, we are. You mentioned a lot that, or not a lot, but you mentioned that the museum definitely offers, programming for young people and students. But I'm just curious about how many older adults typically visit the museum.
Well, older adults, I would say that that's our number one audience right now. Since we've opened,
Oh.
yeah, since we've opened in 2021, we've had more seniors than anyone else to visit our museum. And some of those are groups from local senior communities that come out as groups, but we also have a lot of seniors that come in as general visitors, and that's because they are the ones that remember history. They're the ones that's more connected to history. So I couldn't give you an exact number, but I can tell you that the percentage of our visitorship is about 60 to 70% are older adults.
Wow. Now, Mark, do you have any upcoming events during the month of February and as well as March that you would like to highlight?
Oh, definitely, definitely. We definitely have some interesting things going on for Black History Month. Um, the first one is an example of one of those partners. We are doing some programming on site at the Kid Museum here in Montgomery County, and that's one of our partners that we've worked with now. This will be the second or third year that we collaborate with them to do some programming during Black History Month. We also have a special day that will be open on President's Day. We're typically closed on Monday, so we'll be open on that day to allow guests to come out with their families since kids will be out of school and hopefully it won't snow that day. We also have our history hour for the month of February that will be all about Thurgood Marshall and his start here in Maryland. And that'll be a program then that'll take place on the evening of February the 20th at 6 p.m. Then I'm really excited about February 22nd is our Black History Month Family Day. And that's where we have tons of hands-on programming that talks about life here on this plantation, but also at the Dawn Settlement where Josiah Henson, it's the Dawn Settlement that Josiah Henson established once he made his way to Canada. So I'm very excited about that. We also have the Black Tastic virtual festival that's taking place on February the 26th and 27th, and tons of school students will be participating in that festival. And Reverend Josiah Henson, and our museum will be featured during that virtual conference. And then finally in March, we have a history hour on the 20th of March, starting at 6 p.m., where we have Dr. Ichile, a local professor, who's going to be talking about labor in the African American community and the enslaved community and how that has impacted the African American culture here in Maryland and Montgomery County.
Mark, you have a full calendar.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Well, since it is Black History Month, I definitely want to ask you, kind of what this month means to you in light of what you do for the parks.
Well, to me, it's important because while this is a month of Black history, most importantly, it is American history. Black history is American history. And what I would love to see is Black history celebrated throughout the year. But if this is a month where we're going to lift up that those contributions, I think that this is a great month to celebrate our museum and our impact on this community.
Thank you for that, Mark. Well, it seems like, there's obviously a lot to discover with not only Maryland's rich history, but specifically Montgomery County and the remarkable contribution of African Americans. But I'd like to pivot to Cheryl. And Cheryl, you know this from the founding of the colony through today, Montgomery County and Maryland have been shaped by a narrative infused with the spirit of African Americans and their contributions. Josiah Henson is just the linchpin of which, Mark just talked about the museum. But take us back a little bit and talk specifically about the thematic interpretation, timeline, and the history of the parks in Montgomery County. Take your time.
Oh, wow. So that just expanded out to a whole history of it. So thanks again, Katie, for an opportunity to share. Within Montgomery Parks, we have a section within our Park Planning and Stewardship Division that focuses on the history through the public museums and historic sites that are open. We're called History in the Parks is our tagline. And with that, there is a focus and has been for decades on the African American experience within Montgomery County that we've been able to tell through these parks within the Montgomery Park system. And with the acquisition of the Josiah Henson Museum and Park, which originally happened in 2006, we were able to now focus on that African American experience from the point of enslavement through the lens of Reverend Henson. So if we look through the lens of Reverend Henson, now we have a story of a critically important Marylander that we move through his life in enslavement into freedom. We have now that told through the archaeological excavations and the historical interpretation at the Josiah Henson Museum and Park, as we look at our other park, which is our Woodlawn Manor Cultural Park, which houses the new Woodlawn Museum, which is a 3-story, beautiful, restored 19th century stone barn, which is unique in and of itself within the county. We have there the focus on the what I call a resistance to slavery through the story of the Underground Railroad experience with our trail. It's a natural surface trail that allows you to go through and experience the environment of the enslaved. This is not an immersive interpretive experience where you're going to pretend that you are escaping from slavery, but it casts you into an environment that moves through a portion of Montgomery County where there were actual footprints of the enslaved moving through this county on into freedom at the Woodlawn Park. And it is also an area where we can focus on the Quaker heritage there, as this was a former Quaker property, along with the 19th century landscape of agriculture. So this is that unique opportunity there. And then we have one of our oldest historic sites, the Oakley Cabin African American Museum and Park, which is located next door in Sandy Spring, in Olney, Woodlawns in Sandy Spring. In Olney, right next door in historic Brookville, is Oakley Cabin. An Oakley Cabin is a preserved 19th century log cabin that was built formerly as a slave quarter as a part of a larger Oakley plantation. But now we focus on the story of the people who lived there after enslavement, the freedmen, men and women who resided in what was one of 3 cabins that are located there along Brookville Road, Oakley being the last that remains standing. And it's looking at their lives based on that historic research that we have have a rich amount of historic research on what life was like post-freedom. So it's that really critical, important period of American history Reconstruction era that we focus on at Oakley Cabin. And then we have two other sites that allow us to focus on that African American experience during freedom. We have Newmantown, which is located in Durwood as a part of the Agricultural History Farm Park, the largest of our parks. It's over 450 acres. But within that was a community of a family unit of Newmans who came up from Virginia post-Civil War, who settled in this area of Montgomery County. And there is a relationship that we have found through the descendants between those who lived at Oakley Cabin and the Newman family, because they shared the same house of worship, the Mount Zion Church, which is right there in Brookville. So we have that experience. And then one of another unique experiences at Brookside Nature Center, there is the Harper Cabin, which was relocated from Poolesville, where it was originally built by Thomas Harper, a freedman, after the Civil War, and moved to Brookside Nature Center. And there it has now interpreting the story of the Harper family. And so we were really, really fortunate to be able to acquire the Henson site that would be able to complete this trilogy of the African American experience, literally from slavery into freedom.
Wow. You mentioned Newmantown, Harper, Oakley, Woodlawn, Josiah Henson.
Mhm.
Of those different sites, do you
Mhm.
still have, does the Montgomery County Park still have relationships with the descendants?
We do. What we have, we are really fortunate to have our descendant families involved with both the formation of some of the parks and then the ongoing programmatic experiences. One of the oldest descendant family groups that is still involved with the site is at the Agricultural History Farm Park, the Newman family that I mentioned. We've been hosting their family reunion now for over 20 years. And so there are members of the Newman
Mm,
family that are a part of the Friends of the Agricultural History Farm Park, a group that supports the farm park in providing public programming and supports the programming there at the site. We have with the Harper Cabin family descendants, the Harper descendants,
mm.
within the past decade have been also involved in programming, but we've been privileged to host their family reunion now twice, their 10-year family reunion, and the newest of which is the Josiah Henson Museum and Park, where we have hosted the Henson family, but also the Henson and Riley family members serve on our advisory committee for the Josiah Henson Museum. The Riley family, which Isaac Riley was the white owner for the plantation and who held Henson and his family enslaved, have participated since the acquisition of the property in the development of this site and understood and gave their strong support that this site would be focused on the Josiah Henson story. And so in that I don't know how unique that makes that occurrence, but it is one that we relish and we're very proud of, that we can say that we have of the story presented by these family descendants. At Woodlawn and Oakley, we're in the process of researching more information about both the enslaved community at Woodlawn, as well as the freedmen who resided in those three cabins at Oakley Cabin
Mm.
from the late 19th century into the 20th century. So we are very much attuned to our descendant families and blessed to have them continuously involved in the development of these parks.
Wow. Now, Cheryl, during Black History Month, how are the parks celebrating the people, the progress, the arts, and the inspiration of African American stories in Montgomery County? I know that Mark mentioned a lot of programming for the specific programming for Josiah Henson Museum and Park, but I'm just curious, generally speaking.
Generally speaking, we have a couple of sites because let me back up and explain it this way. Within parks, our historic sites, not all of them are blessed with heat and air all day, every day throughout the year. That would be the Josiah Henson Museum and Park. It's heat and air all day, every day. So then most of our sites have unconditioned spaces. Like when you go to Woodlawn Manor Cultural Park, the Woodlawn Museum in this three-story story, beautiful stone barn. It is an unconditioned space, which means it is neither heated nor air conditioned in summer nor winter, which limits the time frame that we can provide programming. However, the historic mansion has been restored and will be conducting programs. So during Black History Month, the Woodlawn Museum will be hosting their own Family Day, which is part of their Family Day series. The Agricultural History Farm Park is one of those unconditioned spaces, and our farmhouse is under restoration, so it will not have on-site activities, as is the same with Oakley Cabin. We are closed during their months, but Black history fortunately can be found within parks 365 days at Oakley Cabin, as well as Henson, Woodlawn, Kingsley Schoolhouse, and Ag History Farm Park. They're outdoor interpretive signage, which provide a little bit of background and information about the rich history and the culture that has taken place within these parks. And at Oakley Cabin, there is the new augmented reality program that Montgomery County has spearheaded to launch at Oakley Cabin, where you can come anytime the snow and ice doesn't hold you back, but you can come with your cell phone and follow the QR codes that are stationed throughout the park and learn a little bit more about this experience of these freedmen and women who lived at Oakley Cabin. And on your phone, you're able to see the structure and understand a little bit more of the architecture. You can add different amenities that would have been on the site, different structures and so forth, pig pen, chicken coop. You can add as many chickens as you think they would have had around the area, but it's all meant to bring you back to a landscape of the 19th century, to really help you to see that this was not this beautifully landscaped small park, but it was a busy, bustling community of farm workers and freedmen and independent people who were building their own lives.
Wow. You know, Cheryl, one of the first questions that you answered was about the thematic timeline, and you talked about a story of an experience of perseverance and courage and triumph, and from the horrors, obviously, of enslavement, but to the heroism, and Maryland specifically, of the Underground Railroad. Can you talk about the 250th celebration that will be taking place next year? Can you briefly tell us about it?
Yeah. So next year we'll be celebrating the country's 250th anniversary. And as I mentioned at the bicentennial 50 years ago, that we acquired the Harper Cabin, which was moved over and preserved and reassembled at the Brookside Nature Center in an effort to preserve history. While next year we're not going to be moving any structures into parks and so forth, but we are going to be highlighting the experiences of what it means to be American, what's happened during these past 250 years. We don't have a number of colonial sites that are open to the public within Montgomery Park's inventory of historic and cultural buildings, but there are stories that are rich in helping the public to understand how our African American, Native American, our indigenous, and our current immigrant populations have shaped who we are in both Montgomery County, within Maryland, and across the country. And so there will be a series of programs that are focused on that, on how we as now Americans have shaped what we are calling America. What have been the sacrifices made, what have been some of the gains through the programming. And so we're working with a number of agencies across the state. Mark mentioned but a few within the county, but we'll be working with the state tourism office as well as the county's tourism office to promote these historic sites. So many people will learn about history next year. And we're hoping that this year, as they come through, this will be the prelude and the build up to some really in-depth discussions through some really in-depth programming that's going to be coming online next year.
That's exciting, and I like a good build up. So to, build on where Mark ended, he talked about what Black History Month meant to him. I would like for you to answer that same question, in light of everything that you're doing with the parks, which is exceptional work, and to preserve the history in Maryland and again, specifically in Montgomery County, what does this month mean for you?
Hmm. So for me, it's an opportunity. I'll echo a little bit of what Mark said. It is to lift up these unknown stories that people don't know about. But I am a staunch supporter of the 360-day leap year of learning and studying and focusing on Black history because it exists all the time. It is around us every single day. And the part that I am most fortunate and what I do on a day-to-day basis is to provide access to our public on a day-to-day basis. And during Black History Month, this is our time to really shine. The Heritage Months are our time to not only lift up, but to really hone in and define these stories that people never knew existed. People never knew about Thomas Harper. They never knew about Reverend Henson, and have an opportunity to come and engage. You'll find during the Heritage Month, we often will offer free admission to sites for general public, making it accessible to folks who otherwise might not have an opportunity to come out. And that happens throughout the year. That's not just during Black History Month. That's throughout the year. There will be these opportunities to introduce this rich history and culture to a broader population. So I welcome Black History Month as a time to really hone in and focus on some unique conversations. Labor is the conversation this month, but it'll continue throughout the year as we move to our Harvest Festival at the end of the year at the Ag History Farm Park. We'll be exploring Black labor there and looking at Black farmers within the
Yes.
county and looking and lifting them up and shining that light there.
Well, thank you both for taking the time and journeying us through Montgomery County and how we honor the lives of American heroes like Thomas Harper and Josiah Henson and Harriet Tubman and so many others that are unknown in the mainstream. So thank you again for your time, and we look forward to having you all back on the show, perhaps again soon, maybe again next year.
Thank you for the
Thank
invitation.
you again, Katie.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Well, that concludes our program for today. As you can see, the voices of those 50 plus matter every day and in every way. To learn more about services for seniors in Montgomery County, please visit the Montgomery County Seniors website by visiting montgomerycountymd.gov/senior or call the Senior Resource Line at 240-777-3000. And as always, thank you for watching 50 Plus in Montgomery County. Happy Black History Month.